No, we're on. We're mute. Just we have to be muted.
Oh, you want us to be muted?
Yeah, we have to get Mary Cummings because the one that's muted.
Some think it is. The crickets, for example, I think the wording was that they have more efficient protein. I don't know exactly what that means. But the main thing is, worldwide, probably the greatest problem with people getting good nutrition, not starving, is protein. You got to have the protein. really essential. So insects look like a good way to supplement people's diets so that they could live better. All right. Now that we got a taste for them, you can buy chocolate-covered ants, by the way. I tried ants and tapioca pudding once when I was overseas. I'm not a fan of that myself, but it's an option. All right, so the question then becomes, there are a lot of insects, and especially on some hot summer nights, you're out in the backyard and geez, it seems like everything in the world is flying around you, you know, buzzing your lights and whatnot. How many species of insects do you think occur in New Jersey? $5,000, 3 million, 28 million. Any guess? It can be bad, but not that, not 28 million, no. And again, pretty significant, but we're about roughly 5,000 species of insects occur in New Jersey. And some of them are really very noticeable greenheads in the spring, early summer. They were horrific this last year. But that's approximately the number we have here. There are new species being found all the time. One thing interesting about insects is the further south you go, the more species you'll encounter. Further north, the fewer number of species. That stands to reason because generally our northern latitudes are cooler, shorter summer, if you will. And so it's more difficult for a wide variety of lifestyles to occur in colder places. If you go to the tropics, you'll find that there are many more plant species, and so there are many more insects. Okay. And so with that question, what number represents the number of insects you might find in the world? There you go, 28 million. Now, nobody has gone out and counted them, but researchers in the tropics have counted like the number of plant species. You know, there's, again, new species being found all the time, but they've done ecological studies, and there's a relative number of insect species that are associated with each plant species. And so it's just kind of a simple, take the number of plant species, just have a simple number of insects, and you wind up with a number approaching 28 million. So quite a lot. And Oliver Wendell Holmes, not the judge, said no man can truly be called an entomologist. The subject is too vast. And they're absolutely right. There's not one of us entomologists who can claim to know everything about it. Virtually impossible. All right. Oh, I want to mention here in New Jersey, we have white and red oaks. There's about 425 species associated with the red and white oaks. One accounts for a fair number of insects that either feed on it or interact with it in some way. I'm just a tad rusty. It's been a couple of years since I've done one of these talks due to COVID and so on. Now, going a step further with the business of the number of species. First of all, this pie chart shows the number of described species. What do we mean by described? We have scientists working with plants, fungi, all sorts of animals, insects, and etc. Biologist says to describe a new species, that means they've studied representative organisms from this group of organisms that can interbreed. And so after they've determined that this group constitutes a species, they will then sit down and write a description of that organism, whether it's an insect or a tree, whatever. And then it's published in scientific literature. That means it's described, a described species. Okay. So this chart up here shows just the described species. And you'll notice that plant and fungi take the majority of this pie graph from roughly here all the way around to up there. Vertebrates, the animals with backbones, are just this little sliver. Excuse me. Invertebrates, all those animals without backbones, but not including insects, are this wedge. And over here, the number described insects, that wedge. Okay. Now, if we go to the estimates, all of the described species here make up this wedge here. Everything else is the estimated undescribed species of insects. Just to give you an idea how we fit into things. Okay, so that means if any of you are looking for a new job, you're retired and you're bored with what you're doing, you know, hey, come on over. We have lots of work in entomology that can be done yet. Okay, and here's another way of looking at it. You'll see here, there's a number of organisms that are shown: spiders, clam, fish, a frog. There's an elk here. Oh, there's the elk. Yeah. And then this enormous fly. The relative size of the organism, the animal, is proportional to the number of species. And so you can see that this fly is humongous in comparison to anything else. Okay, any questions or thoughts about this? Doesn't mean that they're going to overrun your house or home or the backyard or anything necessarily, but there's just a lot of bugs out there. Okay, so where are they found? Or maybe a better question would be, where do they not occur? Where could you go and not find insects? And inside volcanoes doesn't count. Yes. The ocean, on or in? Yep, you got it. Right on. The one place that you can go in the world where you aren't going to be bothered by insects is to go scuba diving or snorkeling in the ocean. Insects do not live in the salt water. And I'm not sure why that is, whether it's a matter of their physiology, they can't figure out how to deal with salt water, straight salt water. There might be from their relatives, the crabs and such. So not really sure why they aren't there. We do have insects that live in brackish water, salt marsh mosquitoes. They will do quite nicely in brackish water along the coastline and so on. So open seawater. We do have a few insects that live on the surface of the ocean. This is a water strider, and relatives of this insect occur here in the summertime. You can see them skimming around on the surface of ponds and slow-moving streams. They're predators. They catch insects that fall into the water. They skim over and latch onto them and eat them. We have this one, it's called Halibates, salt lover, skimming across the surface of calm oceans. I don't know what they do in a hurricane, but anyway. All right. No one said anything about the number of species that live in the Antarctic, but we have approximately 67 species of insects in the Antarctic. The largest true land animal in the Antarctic is a midge. Penguins and seals aren't really land animals. They use the land to reproduce, but then they're off swimming the rest of their lives in the ocean. So these midges feed on the organic debris from the seals and the penguins. And so if you had to go and make an insect collection in Antarctica, you would be hard pressed to come up with much of anything. But you look around the dung on the ground and so on, and you might find a few midges. And these midges, the larval midges, that are just over 1/4 of an inch long. So one of the coldest places on Earth still has insects. If you go north of the Arctic Circle, there's approximately 250 species of insects. So no matter where you go cold-wise, they're going to be there. And I haven't experienced it myself. I have been told that the mosquitoes are horrendous when you get up on the tundra, like in northern Canada, to the point that some people joke that one way to stay warm is to let the mosquitoes swarm over you. I'm not sure I would enjoy that, but that's an option. Okay. We're spending this time talking about insects. They're virtually everywhere. And so we just typically think of them in terms of good and bad. They do some good things for us and they do some bad things for us. What are some of the good things that they do? Pollinate, yes. Yep, pollination is a biggie. Roughly 35% of the food we eat come from pollinated plants. I'm sorry? Yes, a lot of tunneling going on by various insect groups. All right, tunneling in the soil, yeah. Right, exactly. All right, anything else? Okay, let's see what I might include here. I suppose it would be fitting to say honey also, but that's part of the food. All right, as pollinators, very, very important. Beneficial insects, mitigating pest insects. We have the good guys eating the bad guys. All right. As food for the food chain, there's a lot of things that eat insects, starting with the very small things, spiders, working our way up through toads and fish, bigger animals eating smaller animals, and so on. Insects are the bottom line for many of these chains. As human food, a couple of years ago, National Geographic ran a story where they estimated that over 2 billion people in the world relied heavily on insects for protein, which is just exactly what we talked about earlier. So this is a pretty substantial amount. If you go to open air markets in other parts of the world, especially toward the tropics, you would be able to buy bags of bugs that are already fried or roasted and take them home and munch on them. Have a beer, crunch a few dry crickets, not bad. All right, as part of the planet's ecology, a lot of insects are involved in returning organic matter to the soil. Detritivores, scavengers, etc. Okay, if it wasn't for all these insects breaking down insect bodies, we could be walking through ankle-deep dead insects outside. So they're very important in terms of breaking down the organic matter. Okay. See anything else? Oh yes, insect products, honey, silk, and lacquer. Insects have had an amazing role in our history, one that's very often overlooked. The silk from Europe to Asia was a big deal back then. And that was because of the silk production that was coming out of China. They had figured out how to make cloth out of the webbings of the silk caterpillars. That was a major factor in the exploration of the world. Okay, well, these are some of the good things. Oh, I'm sorry, aesthetics, insect designs. I bet that you can't go hardly to any souvenir shop in the world and not come out with a coffee cup with a dragonfly or a butterfly or got some insect depicted on it. They're very pleasant to look at. All right. Anybody think of anything else? All right, now for the flip side. Oh, no, I'm sorry. See, I told you I'm rusty. Just some examples of the beneficials. Here we have a stink bug that's feeding on the larva of a Colorado potato beetle. This is Pyrrhus bioculatus, predatory stink bug. Most stink bugs are plant feeders. There's a few that are predators and so considered good guys. The coloration of the Colorado potato beetle larva is what we call it's a warning coloration, aposematic, and it means don't eat me because I don't taste good. I may have toxins that's going to hurt you. Heck, I might even kill you if you eat me. You notice the stink bug doesn't really care. Those toxins are usually in the outer layers of the insect. And with this proboscis, the stink bug is able to get past the cuticle of the insects and feast on the fluid inside. So he's able to eat them without problem. Over here on the right, whoops. On the right is a large Calisoma scrutator, a carabid beetle, that's feasting on a gypsy moth. And so this is another example of biological control, if you will. And very important that we have these kind of predators around there. And then, of course, down here, we have a honeybee visiting a flower, collecting pollen and distributing pollen to the flowers. All right. 3 good examples of beneficials. Just a word on generalist predators. A lot of people praying manads are beneficial insects. And they could be. Unfortunately, when you have a generalist predator, like a praying manid, it doesn't keep score like, oh, okay, I'm going to eat all the bad guys today. And then a beneficial insect wanders close and chomp, praying manid has it. They don't have a tally on who's good or bad. They just eat whatever comes near them. So to say they're beneficial is a bit of a stretch. And if you have hummingbird houses, well, they could be a real detriment to the hummingbird population. Okay, and there's a number of general predators, but the praying manads are particularly stand out. Okay, getting around the bad side. What's the downside of insects?
Spread disease.
Spread disease, absolutely. What else? They're what? Creepy. Yeah, yes. I'm sorry? Wood destroying, yes. There's a number of insects that would love to eat you out of house and home.
You want to hear this?
Yeah. Anything else?
Entomology.
Damaged crops, a big one, absolutely.
You want to hear this class?
All right, let's see what else we might add. As disease carriers, this is a huge thing. And in a moment, we'll dive into that a little more closely. As crop pests, probably every plant you would grow and consider it your crop, whether it's an African violet on the windowsill or 10 acres of corn, there's going to be something that would like to eat it. All right, so then it becomes a crop pest. So yes, these are very significant, affecting aesthetics as well as our food supply. Structural pests. Anything made out of wood is fair game. Steel and iron, they don't do so well on. When it comes to wood, yep, we have a number of insects that will feed on. Allergies and phobias. There are people that are allergic to insects for various reasons. Bee stings, even when the insects shed their cuticles, some people are allergic to that shed cuticle. Then we have the phobias. Over the course of my time as an entomologist, I've ran into about 3 people who are beyond being just scared of insects. They have reached a point where their lives are pretty much in shambles because they're fearful of insects. It gets to a point where the people that I've talked to like this, I really can't do anything for them other than to tell them that the specimens they brought in are not insects. And so my advice to them is, you need to go see somebody like a psychiatrist or psychologist. Yes, exactly. So, but these people are in need of help. All right. Let's see, what did I have? Just simply annoying. I don't know why it is, but in the summertime, I go outside and there's a particular kind of gnat, just a little tiny fly that likes to hover in front of my face. I don't know what the heck it is. It drives me nuts. And they're so small, you swipe at them and they just dodge. And, yes, for me, that's very annoying. Green gnats are very annoying. And yes, inspirations for really bad movies. And if you look like that, I guess you can understand how that might happen. This is the head of a dragonfly, a tiger beetle, Cicindela punctulata. These predators, they're about roughly ½ inch long. They run on the surface of the soil. Sunny days, they're on paths, and some of them are brilliantly colored, but they're all predators. They catch crawling insects on the run. Okay, now these carriers. It's been said that half of all humans that have lived in the world over time have died from malaria. Half. In comparison to all the different wars and other diseases and so on. Malaria spread by mosquitoes. That's aside from blood transfusions, that's the one and only way that the mosquitoes spread malaria. If you never get bit, don't have to worry about it. Back in the 60s, there was a time when experts thought there was a chance of eliminating malaria, like has happened with smallpox. I don't recall the last time they found a case of smallpox, but it's been a while. And the thought was that we could do that with malaria. And for a little while it worked. The problem with malaria eradication programs is they require stable governments with money. And if you don't have a stable government, you aren't going to have a malaria eradication program. So for a brief while in the 60s, it looked like maybe it was going to be possible. But then politics and war took over, and that hasn't happened. And it seemed to taper off maybe around 2000 or so. There wasn't as much news about malaria. But then there was the way buildings were being constructed, new buildings, and they were trapping water here and there, and the mosquitoes are breeding and so on and so on. So whether we ever get rid of malaria is a real question. there's 5 strains of malaria. Parasite Plasmodium falciparum is the worst, with something in the neighborhood 80 to 85% mortality. So if you do come down with malaria, hopefully it's not going to be that particular strain. But there are a lot of other diseases of insects vector. Dengue fever, yellow fever, West Nile virus, chikungunya, Zika, elephantiasis, bubonic plague epidemic, typhus, Chagas disease, sleeping sickness, leishmaniasis, also known as Baghdad boils. All these different diseases are vectored by insects. They occur in different places in the world. And when you look back in history and you see where invading armies went, and then they stopped in their advance in certain areas of the world, part of the reason they stopped the war was because their soldiers were dying from unknown diseases, because they had blundered in area with a different insect vectoring different diseases that they weren't used to. That's one of the reasons Alexander the Great stopped where he did in India. Soldiers were dying. Heck, that's not good. You can't have an army when everybody's dying. So anyway, we have a lot of these things. And I had a brush with sleeping sickness that spread tsetse flies. I was overseas for a couple of years and came from Africa. And at the time, I was still not well versed in diseases and so on, pathogens. Riding along a car in part of Kenya, Africa, and suddenly there's a large fly landing on my arm, about a ½ inch long, pretty decent sized fly. And immediately it stuck its beak into my arm. I thought, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And then I realized it's a tsetse fly. Cool, because I'd been a junkie of far off explorations and adventures and so on. And I was thinking, wow, this is really cool. Tsetse fly sucking blood out of my arm. It sat there and swelled up. Finally, it pulled its beak out and flew out the window. And I was thinking, wow, cool, really stupid. Later, I talked with a medical entomologist at Michigan State, and he said, you're lucky to be alive. Had the tsetse fly, that particular one, vector had the sleeping sickness pathogen, I could well be dead. And so he realized that wasn't cool at all then. And if you ever had the chance to be in Africa, don't let the tsetse fly bite you. Okay, the most dangerous animal in the world, Aedes aegypti, one of the mosquito species that's widely distributed in the world. National Geographic on the Nat Geo Wild often has these programs that talk about what's the 5 most dangerous animals in Africa, or in the world or whatever. They overlook mosquito. Aedes aegypti transmits several different diseases and accounts for more loss of human life than anything else. Then we have bed bugs and head lice. Head lice I haven't heard too much about in the news lately. Bed bugs really came on hard and strong here for a few years. And you would see newspaper articles about how even Broadway theaters in New York City were infested with bed bugs. Go see a play and come home with a... So they were really getting widespread. And unfortunately, one of my relatives told me just the other day that they have bed bugs. And so that's not necessarily good news. But these insects do vector diseases. All you want to do is just be cozy with you, share a little blood, friends, and that they ask for. The head lice are particularly troublesome for school kids because kids like to share combs, scarves, hats, and so on. Our youngest daughter went to band camp one summer, came home with head lice, and she was telling me, Dad, my scalp's really itchy. What's the deal? I said, you probably have head lice. A couple of days later, yes, discovered she did have head lice. So the whole family, we had to do the thing. Everybody had to wash their hair, sometimes using rubbing alcohol to rinse through to get rid of the head lice. We had to wash our bedding and some of our clothes, because that's the only way you're going to get rid of them. There are things that you can buy at the drugstores, grocery stores, for managing head lice. And a majority of them don't work because head lice are resistant to the insecticide permethrin, which is the active ingredient in many of these shampoos. They have developed a resistance. So you can go ahead and wash your hair, with this stuff, and you're still going to have head lice. The real problem is the nit, the egg, because that egg is glued onto your strands of hair. And so you can buy the box of louse shampoo, and often there's a comb, a nit comb, along in the package. Throw away the shampoo, but keep the nit comb. Because if you become infested, which I don't think you have to worry about, if you do become infested, then you need to take, after you've showered and gotten everything out that you can, you sit and use that nit comb for about 20 minutes a day afterwards, sitting there taking it and combing you through your hair in every way you can imagine, because you will pick up the nits with that comb and also the very small new hatchlings. So that's the one way to get rid of them. The beds, I wish it was that easy. Bugs are a real challenge, and probably you'll have to end up calling an exterminator to get rid of them. Okay, crop pests. I've been battling for a long time an insect called pepper weevil. It's not an insect. It's brought in every summer, and its primary host are pepper plants. They don't really feed on the plant necessarily, but when you cut open the fruit, you may have a pepper that looks like this, and that's because the larval stages of the weevil have tunneled around inside the fruit. There's nothing wrong with eating that fruit. You clean out the seeds and the pithy part, and the rest of it's fine to use. So that isn't a big deal necessarily. But where the crop loss comes into the picture is here. Out in the field, when the plant senses that the developing fruit have the pepper weevil larvae inside, the plant aborts the fruit. So for a farmer, there's his profits all laying on the ground. And sometimes this is very severe. There are some farms in our area here that have a near total loss on peppers because of the pepper weevil. So it's a very serious insect for us. But there are many other examples. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the marmorated stink bug. This is a general pest, feeds on a number of plants, mostly fruit trees. It's where it's the worst. And but it does attack vegetables, especially the cucumbers here. You can see these dark spots are the stink bugs, and they're making this cucumber look really ugly, as well as that one. Very prolific, but the number down here in the last several reached their peak in 2010. They were everywhere, literally. But since then, the numbers are declining. There's a biological control that's now has been released out in the wild. And it's a little egg parasite, a little tiny wasp that inserts its egg into the eggs of the stink bug. And so that's obviously helping to bring down the populations. And then we have structural pests, subterranean termites, Formosan termites, carpenter ants, and others. Here we have termites. This is a termite reproductive, male or female. At this point, you really can't tell. But way to recognize it is the very long, gauzy wings. Here are the worker termites. They will go after damp wood. They will desiccate easily. So they have to keep a high humidity in the tunnels where they're getting their food, tunnelling around in the wood. And then over here are the soldiers. I have not yet seen any soldier ants in the subterranean, soldier termites in the subterranean termites that I've seen. I don't know, non-existent or just very rare. But in any case, termites will go after damp wood. Anything close to that's on the soil or anything that's close to the soil is within their reach. And one of the things that you can see from termites on the side of your house, you may have like a cement foundation. Sometimes you will see mud tunnels that have been built on the outside of the foundation so that the termites can get up to where the wood is. They're very good at this. All right. Left unchecked, they do their best to take down crops. My wife and I live in a very old house, over 200 years old. I can probably go down the basement and show you about 10 generations of termites that have had lunch there. So, all right, and then we have carpenter ants. Carpenter ants are large, black, usually black. There are brown carpenter ants as well, but they're large ants, very active, very fast moving. They're in your house. The ones that you'll notice the most are the soldiers, which have very large heads and they move very quickly. And what they're doing inside your house is they're looking for food. They will in the wood as well, but they're not eating the wood. They're building their nest inside the wood structure, so they prefer dry wood. Damp is not to their liking. And so what we learned about carpenter ants is that they may have several sub-nests, 3 or 4 areas outside of your house where they will have what appears to be the main nest, but actually they're just all part of the same thing. And then they may have some inside the house. And again, we had the joy of discovering carpenter ants in our house. They had started a nest, a colony in the roof over the kitchen. And so we took care of that problem. We pulled the asphalt shingles off and found the queen and killed it, and that took care of our problem. But sometimes the damage from these insects is very extensive and will cost you a bunch of money to get it taken care of. Now, sometimes you'll come across galleries like this where the insects have been but are currently gone. And one way to tell the carpenter ant damage from termite damage is the galleries of carpenter ants are smooth. And that's because they chisel out the wood and they deposit a soil outside the nest. Termites, these galleries will have a muddy appearance because they have to have high humidity. And so it tends to get muddy in there between defecation and other stuff going on. It has more of a muddy appearance. How can you tell termites from others? From the carpenter ants? Looking at the reproductive, which is often what you see in the spring, generally a black body, but the antennae are straight. And then the wings are very long in relation to the body. And the waist, well, just a generic term, waist, the middle portion of the body in ants is constricted, but very broad. In the termite, there's no constriction here. So there's 3 ways: straight antennae, elbowed antennae over here, wide waist, narrow waist, long wings, shorter wings. Those 3 things will help you separate termites from carpenter ants and other ants. And bamboo skewers are not safe from wood-boring insects. One of the master gardener coordinators years ago across Cumberland County opened a pack of bamboo skewers and found several that had been tumbled by probably some small wood-boring beetle. Okay, we'll take it up a notch now. Insects belong to a very large group of animals called arthropods. That name arthropod means jointed leg. All right. So this harlequin stink bug over on the right here. And if you look at it, can you see all right if I stand here? Yeah, okay. If you look closely, you'll see that the body is comprised of segments. There are several segments in the antennae. The head has several segments of its own, but then here's a big portion of the thorax and the wings covering over the abdomen. But you can see there are segments along here and in the legs. So the way to think of insects are like a knight in armor. They have an exoskeleton that's on the outside of the body, but it has to have joints in order for them to be able to move around. And that body system seems to work pretty well. So who's in this group? These are among the first land animals ever to occur on the planet. We have trilobites, which are long gone, hexapods, which are the insects. Then we have millipedes, centipedes, arachnids, and all kinds of bizarre critters in here. Wind scorpions, pseudoscorpions, and so on. And then we have the crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, crayfish, sawbugs, pilgrims. So just a reminder, when you want to eat and you have the surf and turf entree, just remember that lobster, the tail that you're chewing into, that lobster is a relative to insects. But who knows, a little melted butter, tastes great. Okay. It's an orb weaver. Tell me what group it belongs to. I hear a lot of arachnids. All right, why?
8 legs.
8 legs, very good. Centipede. 100 legs, yeah. Insect? No. Insects have 6 legs. Centipede, as the name gives 100 legs. So, no chance of being an insect. What about a millipede? Same thing. If a centipede didn't qualify, a millipede is way over the top. Tick? Yep, same as a spider. They're an arachnid. They have 8 legs. Actually, when the ticks first come out of the egg, they do have apparently six legs. But at the first molt, they get another pair of legs. And this guy, insect or not? That's right, it's not. Count the legs. Insects never have more than 6 legs. Anything above that is something else. Okay. Pardon? This is a saw bug. Yep. Very common. They like to live under flower pots and other moist areas. They're basically detritus feeders. Okay. How can you tell a centipede from a millipede? Both of them have lots of legs. To start with, you can look at those legs, and if you look closely, you'll see in a centipede, there's 1 pair of legs per body segment. Millipedes have 2 pairs of legs per body segment. So that makes it pretty easy. if you want to stop and pick up the centipede and the millipede and look at them closely. You can also identify them by their behavior. Okay, and best way to illustrate that is, imagine 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up, you're hungry. There's a piece of cake calling to you from the kitchen. And against your will, your body says, okay, I'm getting up, I'm going to eat that piece of cake. You get down to the kitchen, flip on the kitchen light, and something out here in the middle of the floor goes, chow, and it's gone. That was a house centipede, okay? Seeing that, you decide, I'm not really that hungry, I'm gonna go back to bed, turn the light off, and do. The next night, some piece of cake has managed to survive another day. And again, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think, I'm hungry. All right, here we go, go down. Again, you're ready to flip on the light, but this time you're kind of tensed up, wondering what I'm gonna see out here. Flip on the light, and yep, there is something there, but it's moving very slowly. And so, okay, you keep an eye on it, but you go around, get your little glass of milk, get the piece of cake out, eat the cake, and maybe this thing in the middle of the floor has moved that far. That's a millipede. They're very slow moving. All right. Centipedes are fast, millipedes are slow. So that's one really good way to determine what you're looking at, as opposed to sitting there counting the number of legs. All right, speaking of legs and body regions, how are we doing on time? Okay. Here we have a carabid beetle, 3 body regions: head, thorax, and abdomen. Okay, all insects are separated like that: head, thorax, and abdomen. Spiders have only two body regions: cephalothorax and abdomen, and the others, other different kinds of combinations. But for telling insects, this is what you look for. Everything over here is head. This middle region is all the thorax, and the abdomen back here. A lot of people would say, okay, I can see the head, and here's the thorax here, and the rest of it is abdomen here. But no, that's not how the body is organized. The end of the thorax is where the hind legs attach to the body. That's where the thorax ends, and then the rest of it's abdomen. Yes. I'm sorry?
How much that?
3. Yep. Okay, this is the kind of organization that you have in all the insects. They all have an exoskeleton. The one characteristic of all the arthropods, regardless of which group we're talking about, they have an exoskeleton. That means they have the supporting structure for their body on the outside, and nothing but fluids and muscles and so on the inside. Unlike us, our bones are on the inside, not out on the exterior of our body. All right, this exoskeleton is made of chitin. It's a polysaccharide, a long chain sugar. And it was long thought you couldn't digest that. But now recent studies have shown that, yeah, you probably can. And so when you have those chocolate covered ants next time, not only do you get the benefit of the chocolate, but you get a little bit of out of the chitin as well. This exoskeleton gives the body strength, flexibility, and prevents water loss. Well, helps prevent water loss, put it that way. And it also helps limit the size insects can grow. Currently, we have, 21% oxygen in the air. Historical evidence showed when the oxygen levels are higher, the insects were bigger. So they may be limited by the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere as well. Okay, the largest land-dwelling arthropod is this coconut crab that lives on South Pacific Island. With its legs extended out, it's like 3 feet across, tippy toe to tippy toe. They can't swim. They don't live in water. They climb trees. They're predators. They'll feed on anything that can't get out of the way. These are the largest land-dwelling crustaceans, and they are able to be like this on these isolated islands where there's no larger predator to deal with them. But you'll never have to worry about a praying mantis big enough to eat your car, for example. That movie about them, the giant ants in the desert Southwest, a really schlocky movie. If you had a 50-foot long ant sitting out here in the parking lot, you could go up and kick it in the shin and make faces at it, and it couldn't do anything because the exoskeleton would be so heavy it couldn't move. All right, quick anatomy lesson. Outline of an insect body. They have hearts. The heart is located either in the abdomen or up in the thorax. And in some caterpillars, you can see their heart. If you look down the back of the caterpillar, often see the pulsing of the heart. And the pulse starts at the rear and goes forward. And you can actually see the pulsing of the heart going right up the back of the caterpillar. They have an open circulatory system. They do not have veins and arteries. The blood of insects sloshes around inside their body. So it's not a vehicle for spreading oxygen, but nutrients and so on for the different organs to use. They have nervous systems, very excellent nervous systems. They have brains. Sometimes the brains are separated into 2 parts. Sometimes it's all just one conglomerate of nerves. But they have a ventral nervous system where the main nerve cord runs along on the bottom side of the body. So in other words, if applied to us, it'd be a nerve running right under your sternum and down your stomach. We have a dorsal nerve system going down our back. And then along the way, there'll be clusters of nerves here to help operate the legs and up here to help operate the wings. The digestive system isn't all that much different from us in general. There's a lot of variations depending on which insect group you look at, but in general, this is how it works. You have a mouth, an esophagus, and a crop. The crop is where the food is stored, and this is where the first digestive fluids encounter the food. Well, again, in general. After a while, the food moves from the crop through a gizzard or proventriculus here, and then on into the stomach. The stomach here has more of the role of an intestine. And this is where the nutrients go out into the body. And then a short, yes, thanks. And then an anus out here. So in general, this is the digestive system for insects. Again, a lot of variations to that. And then how do they breathe? If their blood doesn't carry oxygen, which it doesn't. And in fact, if you are driving down the road and a large beetle or whatever large insect smacks into your windshield, you'll notice it doesn't ever appear red. It's always yellow or greenish yellow. That's because they don't have hemoglobin in the blood. They don't carry oxygen. So it'll be some other color. Still hard to get off the windshield, but. All right, so how do they get oxygen? They have these small openings called spiracles along on the sides of the body. There's 2 per abdominal segment And then there's just only a pair of circles on the thorax. And these aren't exactly open holes, but they're plates. And in those plates are very small holes where oxygen and other gases move in and out of the body. I happen to think that the movements that the insects undertake, like if you ever watched a wasp land and sit for a while, you notice that the wasp's abdomen is always pulsing. I can't help but think that that's a way that they help move air in and out of the body. So it doesn't sound like it's a very efficient system, but yet it's worked for insects for a long time. So it must be good enough for them. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep. I did a lot of that for a number of years. Looking, the microscopes come in really handy for that. Oh yeah. Yep, absolutely. Okay. All right, so the body organization in general. You have a hard exterior exoskeleton, open circulatory system inside. Heart is located in the abdomen or thorax, maybe both. And then thread-like tubules that run through the body. Part I forgot. After you get past spherical, the oxygen then moves into silvery tubes that go throughout the body. And someday when you're in the right mood, you see a caterpillar, grab it, drop it in boiling water, flip it into a plate with cold water, and tear open the caterpillar, and you'll see these tubules, silver tubules running all over inside the body of the caterpillar. Like I say, it works best when you're in the mood. All right, so it can be summarized by your aluminum container of your favorite beverage, protective outer coating and protecting body fluids inside. Nobody's laughing. Why? All right, let me check the time here. We'll go for a couple more minutes, and then we'll take a break. Okay, so our basic bug: 3 body parts, 6 legs, 1 pair of antennae, and 0, 1, or 2 pairs of wings. That describes everything about insects. If you're wondering, you have a small animal in front of you that flies off. It's not a spider, not a lobster, it's an insect. Okay? Only insects have wings out of the arthropods. Unfortunately, they like to confuse things because not all insects have wings. And I'll show you an example here in a while. Okay, so this is our basic bug. In general, you can identify insects by their size, but then you have to wonder, you have two insects that look identical, except one is really tiny, the other one's quite large. Are they the same species? Maybe, maybe not. Color, light or dark. Pattern, sex, what differences are there? There are some species, and I'll show you here in a little bit, have different colors, same species, but different colors. Shape. Well, shape is a possibility. Use that to help identify, but there are mimics out there. So that's not a guarantee of a sure identification. If you're using any of these characters, it's called picture booking, and this is perfectly fine. I use picture booking often when I try to identify something I'm not certain of. You remember in general what crickets or grasshoppers look like, have the large hind legs. They just sort of like, that's a grasshopper. You just kind of recognize that shape. And that's a kind of picture booking because that's the first thing you go to thinking about. I've seen this before, okay? But you do have to be careful because you can get into trouble if you don't verify yourself. It's sort of like journalists that give an opinion not backed up by references. All right. In this particular case, we've got 3 caterpillars, red, green, and yellow-brown. This is all the same species. This is corn earworm, a highly variable colored insect. Caterpillars, there's many other shades of color for the caterpillars. Also have a variety of wing colors. Some are very light colored, some are very dark colored. They all have the same pattern. So it can be tricky identifying insects just based on their color. Up here we have a series of beetles. This one is totally light colored. This one is totally dark. And then you have gradations in between. These are oriental beetles. They have a lot of diversity of color in terms of the pattern and the brightness, darkness of the shade of the colored parts. But it's all the same species. So it gets tricky. And then we have this. What would you guess this is here? Yellow jacket? Wasp? Wrong. This is called a mantis fly. It has enlarged forelegs like a praying mantis would have, but it has the coloration of a paper wasp. Okay, this is a mimic. It says, I'm trying to fool you into thinking I'm something nasty. In reality, I'm very succulent and you enjoy eating me, but I'm not going to do it. Okay. And then we have these. Does anybody recognize those? What's that? Cave crickets, yes. My younger son did bridge inspections for a while, and he came upon these cave crickets up here on the wall of a bridge. He said he took a photograph and he and his supervisor then ran out from under he does not like insects. So anyway, these are cave crickets. Again, come to my place, we have them up in our house. They hop around, they're carnivores, they feed on other insects or decaying organic debris. And generally innocuous, but they are interesting to look at. Okay. What's this? I'm sorry, what's this? Good guess, but you're wrong. This is a syrphid fly. It has a long body, long abdomen like a dragonfly, and its wings are spread out wide like a dragonfly would be, and with corresponding spots. But this is a flower fly. It belongs to the family Syrphidae, and the syrphids are very good mimics of many different kinds of insects. Okay. You could pick this up. It wouldn't bite you. It wouldn't sting you. It just, thrash around, hope that you're going to let go of it soon. All right. Nothing else happens. Actually, there's a number of these flower flies that are beneficial. All right. I need to throw a cough drop into my mouth and give my throat a break. So let's take a break at this point. Roughly 10 minutes. Get up, stretch your legs. And I think there's probably some insect goodies back there. By the way, I brought a drawer of my collection in so you can see what a professional insect collection looks like. Come up, take a look. Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Oh, yeah. Mhm. Oh, wow.
At first, they didn't know.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, I bet, yeah. Yeah, no, it's pretty nasty. It's not good to have arthropods landing on you and biting you and so on. Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. Ah, okay. Yeah, I've done Zoom presentations now a couple of times, and I have a lot more fun interacting with the audience this way. Me? No, no. There are pens there that are called rapidographs. I don't know if they're still around or not. But anyway, they can have very fine points. And so you can write very, very small with these rapidographs. But then I found out that you can also shrink down the size of your letters on the computer. That's a lot easier. If it's handwritten, yeah, that would be. Mhm. Yeah, these are all carabid beetles. If I have a specialty in entomology, it's with carabids. I've got 6 drawers that would look similar to this. Some are from Michigan. A lot of them, well, most of them are probably from Michigan. A number of them are from here, New Jersey. Mhm. Yeah, you can't use regular sewing pins because they'll rust. And pretty soon you have an insect that has a pile, and eventually the pin breaks. So there's insect pins that are made that will allow you to pin the insect and it will never corrode.
So the ones that you can't
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A little tiny drop of glue on it, and then you touch the side of the insect. I tell you, that's an art to master. I'm encasing some insects totally in glue, which is not a good thing. The ones that are the box in each individual box, most of the time are the same thing. But there are some, well, like this one. There's a variety of species in this box. Well, sometimes it's just because they're available. You know, I've operated traps, through graduate school and so on, plus for work. And lots of times you just end up with a bunch of the same things. And so I've pinned them up. The rare things, I may have 1 or 2 specimens of. No. If it's handwritten, I use a pen called a F. Yeah, and they have the 0 point, and that's what I use to handwrite the labels. Those that are typed, I shrunk down the type on computer, shrink it down to the point where I could use it. I've done a few butterflies, but I'm very clumsy at getting the wings out. Butterflies are cool, wings spread out, see all the colors and everything. And they look really great. And there are people that are very good at that. Not one of them. Mhm. No. It's one thing we do not have is this many beetles. Mhm. There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Mm. Should- Mhm. Yeah. No, to me, it seems obvious evolution is the way to go. But to each his own. No, it's not a stupid question. No. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Actually, I can't. It's hard, right off the cuff. It's hard for me to reconcile both of them, but I'm sure there's a way to do it. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm a longtime fan of dinosaurs and pre-Olympic life and so on. And like I say, for me, it seems very evident of which way to go. And so, but like I said, to each his own. Right.
Are you still with Rutgers?
I am for now, but I'm retiring soon.
Did you know somebody by the name of Timothy Casey?
Yes.
I went to school with him for 12 years.
Ah, okay. Mhm. Oh, yeah. Mhm.
You get to see him.
I have not seen Tim since the 90s.
And he has.
Mhm.
You're up in Piscataway campus.
No. Well, we have two offices, one down at the research farm and then one up at, let's see, where would that be? Well, one office is in Piscataway, but the other is down here at the research farm.
Trying to get my son to go to Rutgers for residence, obviously, in New Jersey. And I said, wow, I think that's a fantastic price.
Ah, yeah.
245,000.
Mm.
What he majored in, he wasn't able to get anywhere else. It was a 5-year program. And he got a job. This goes back to that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. With it.
Penn State urban with the kid.
Oh, okay.
Kind of funny when I was going to Penn State, it was that one foreign student that came in. He was being supported by the agricultural department. With lesser developed country programs. He was, I was ready to see him. He came in, he had to get me course that he had to take. So they were graduate school. His country was sending him.
Oh, yeah.
Told me one time, he said, he doesn't know whether it was
Ah,
some things I don't want to know.
that gets a little dicey.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when governments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of a couple times.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yeah, I come here, I'm usually my hearing helps me for hearing, just that. And
Mhm.
now I ended up with 3 blood clots.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, thank you. All right, take care. Okay. Lots of stuff to cover in the second half, and we ought to start getting back to it. Waiting for people to come in and will ask me about references, and if you go to the nature section of bookstores, you can see all kinds of handbooks and so on for using to identify insects, and even the golden guidebooks. They look like they should be for kids, but even these are very useful. This one's on spiders, one of the few references you can find on spiders. And so as you look over the nature section of the bookstores, you can find a variety of these handbooks. The ones I like most are the Peterson field guides. This one is about just moths, and you can see how thick the book is. A lot of, I don't sound? Okay, that's why I don't get many questions from the back. Really? I don't know how this thing operates. Does that make a difference? Yeah, the blue light is on. Okay, if you can't hear me back, we're good? Okay, good. My favorite of these guidebooks is the Peterson series. Different Audubon Society and other groups have their guidebooks. The only criticism I have of those is that they are frequently showing you photos of the most common insects, the bigger things and so on. And that's okay. But with the Peterson guidebooks, has information that'll apply to anywhere basically in North America you are, north of Mexico. When you get down into Mexico and the more subtropical areas, things get a little weird. And so it's not quite as useful. But for most of North America, the Peterson field guidebooks are really pretty good. And if you have an option, go with it. All of them sure have really good photos and so on. And like I was saying, the golden guides are really pretty. They don't have a lot of facts in them, but they give you good illustrations and give you basic biology. And so these are really handy as well. Okay. I think my cough drop has taken effect, temporarily anyway. Okay, we're looking at insects and get they are. And this is a syrphid fly. It looks like a dragonfly, but it's not. It's a mimic. What about this one? Okay. All right, I'm hearing conflicting hollers out. Who thinks this is a fly? Who thinks it's a wasp or a bee-like? Okay, it's a fly. Yeah. Again, it's mimicking other insects that can sting. It's warning coloration, aposematic. You know, again, if you bother me, you're going to hurt. Okay. If you can convince the predator that you're home free. All right. This is another one of the syrphid flies. These are all very good mimics. All right, what's this one? No. It looks like it, I agree. If you say a fly, you're correct. This is not a syrphid, this is a bradyomyid. And another group that produces mimics. Sometimes they are so good that I have trouble figuring out what the heck are you anyway. There are some syrphid flies look a lot just like this, but they've taken their forelegs, brought them up next to their head, and then they flick their tarsi, their toes out here like it's antennae, like a wasp would do. And sometimes you got to look long and hard to figure out just what this thing is. But this is a fly. It has one pair of wings. That's always a giveaway for flies. You see just one pair of wings. All the wasps, bees, etc., have two pairs of wings. Oops. Any thoughts? Yeah, it's a caterpillar. This is a spice bush butterfly larva caterpillar. It is fairly large. It has these eye spots up on the thorax behind the head. The head is right here. But the coloration is such that when you first glance at it, it looks like it could be the head of a snake. Okay, which is what it's tell would be predators. Hey, leave me alone. I'm a snake. I'm not a caterpillar that you can eat. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This photo was taken by one of my nephews. They were out golfing and saw this galloping across the green. And I've never seen a caterpillar gallop, so I'm not sure just what it was doing, but anyway. Yeah. So mimics come both as immatures and as adults. All right, aposematic coloring is when the insect is advertising, don't try to eat me because I'll harm you in some way. I'll sting you, I'll poison you, leave me alone, basically is what it's saying. And whenever you have an insect that stands out sharply against its background, you have to be suspicious. Just as in the case of the Colorado potato beetle here. It has that aposematic coloring, red and black. Should be a warning sign, but you notice the stink bug has red and black markings also. So like I said earlier, it doesn't care. But monarch butterflies and the nymphalid viceroy butterflies have essentially the same pattern, the same coloration. Birds will maybe eat a monarch butterfly once. And that's all it takes to figure out that, boy, they really taste terrible. And they leave them alone. Okay. Viceroys cash in on that. They'll have the same kind of pattern and basic coloration as well. Oops. Wrong button. Okay. Viceroy on the left, monarch on the right. And then we have urticating hares. This is a caterpillar, saddleback caterpillar. Urticating hares are hares that have toxins in them. If you ever have develop a tip eating caterpillars, I would suggest you eat non-hairy ones. The toxins that are in hairs and spines are enough to give you a bad rash, maybe for a week or so. And this is not a rare insect. It's around. It's It tends to favor like shrubs and small trees. I've seen a couple out on my own, but if you are fascinated with them and you try to pluck them off and put them in a jar, an aquarium or something, be careful how you handle it, because especially if it gets into the sensitive skin, like between your fingers or wrist area, you're probably not going to enjoy the sensation. This has been called probably the most poisonous insect that we have in North America. So how do insects grow? Now we're gliding into the really cool stuff, okay? How do they grow? All the arthropods have to shed their exoskeleton in order to grow. So that's why you have soft-shelled crabs. They have just molted. They have just gotten out of their old exoskeleton, and getting rid of the old exoskeleton allows the animal to expand its body size. So when insects shed their exoskeleton, like the cicada is doing here, if the insect said, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to do this, I want to just stay small, you know, well, let's go back in the old exoskeleton. It's too late. Can't do it, because your body, as soon as the skin breaks open down the back of the insect, it's already grown larger and you can't go back, as they say. All right. So there's a new skeleton already present, but it's very soft right here. And it has to harden up. When this cicada finally gets out of this exoskeleton, it will have to sit and allow the new exoskeleton to harden up for a little while. It's very vulnerable at this point. Anything wanting to make a meal out of it is, you know, is going to be very easy to do. So, but all the insects grow this way. They all shed their exoskeleton anywhere from 3 to maybe 30 times. And when they reach the adult stage, there's no more growth. They do not shed the exoskeleton once they reach the adult stage. Okay. We're going to dive into how they develop a little bit. In some of the reference, they talk about complete metamorphosis and then incomplete metamorphosis. And I've always found those are kind of terms. I like using 4 terms that we have up there: ametabolous, metabolous, hemimetabolous, and holometabolous. Those names contain information that tells you how the insects develop. And so let's see here. Yeah, we'll start with ametabolous. This is a Latinized word. The A at the beginning means without. So basically what this is saying is ametabolous is no change. When the insect hatches out of the egg, it looks almost exactly like the adult, except it's smaller. They don't have wings. And as they mature, they will shed their exoskeleton maybe 3 to 5 times, but they will always look like the adult. No real difference. They live in the same habitat and they eat the same food. Okay, sort of a, I don't know, a quiet way of growing, I guess. Then we go to the parometabolous insects. These have a partial change. When the egg hatches, the insect that comes out of it sort of kind of maybe looks like the adult, but there's obvious differences in proportions of body areas and so on. As the immature grows and sheds its exoskeleton, it begins to change more and more, appearing like the adult. Well, box elder bug is a really good example of that. Box elder bug, stink bugs, many of the aquatic bugs, yeah. Again, the immatures and the adults live in the same habitat and probably feed on the same food. The immatures of these two groups are called nymphs. And that's applied to a rather gradual change in the body appearance. The immatures of the next two groups are named differently. We call them naiads, in this case with the hemimetabolous insects, which means half change. The insects in this group have aquatic immature stages. We call them naiads. Naiad is Greek for water nymph, which seems very appropriate here. The immatures live in water, and as they grow and develop, you will see wing pads begin to appear on their backs. The wing pads are very small, but as the insect matures, the wing pads get larger and larger. When they finally mold into the adult, the wings are expanded and fully functional and ready to fly off. Now, in this group of insects, the immatures live in a totally different habitat from the adults, and they eat totally different food. Well, heck, in the case of the mayflies, they may not eat anything at all. And as I've told different groups, if someday you wake up in the morning and you realize you're a mayfly adult, party hardy, you got about 3 days. And that's it. Okay, and then the last one, holometabolous, meaning whole change or complete change. In this kind of development, you add in an extra step called a pupa. We call the immatures a larva or plural larvae, but when the immatures get to a certain point, they're going to shed their exoskeleton and become a pupa. The pupa is generally a stage where there's no activity. They don't feed, they don't get up and walk around. There is an oddball group that do have pupae that move around. Mosquitoes actually do as well. But they stay in this pupal stage for a period of time, and then finally they make one more mold, and now they're the adults. And this is called complete change, holometabolous. And these insects may or may not occur, the immatures may or may not occur in the same habitat as the adults. They may or may not eat the same thing as the adults. Out of these 4 types of development, this is the most complex, but yet this includes the majority of insects. Everybody okay with this? Any questions? Okay. All right, the ametabolous insect called primitive insects. They're columbella and silverfish. Sometimes you can see large masses of columbella out on the leaves. And even now, if we had a day when it gets above 55, sunny, you could take a postcard out, sit it down in the grass, and probably within a couple of minutes, you'll have a springtail or a columbella jumping onto that cardboard and jumping off. They're very abundant, but we say they're primitive insects, don't have wings, they won't fly. Silverfish are your homes primarily, especially if you have books that haven't years, you'll find silverfish around those. All right, so the metabolous insects, the ones that have a change, they have external wing development. Those are the wing pads on the backs of the immatures. So it's easy to spot this group, especially if they're not in water. You have crickets, grasshoppers, cockroaches, praying mantids, termites, stink bugs, aphids, scales, leafhoppers, froghoppers, head and body lice. Okay, now the head and body lice don't have wings, so you won't see any wing pads on the immatures there. Hopefully you don't see anything at all. But all these insects that have the wing pads that are not living in water, they are all this porometabolous group. So if somebody comes up to you and says, gee, I wonder what this insect is, if you look at it and see that the wing pads on the back of it, and they got it off the tree next door, you could say, well, I may not know exactly what it is, but it's a parometabolous insect. And then you can pick from one of those groups of what you think it might be. So it makes it kind of a handy way to get an initial identification. And here's examples. Here's a walking stick, a kudzu bug, and a ambush predator here, assassin bug. Kudzu bug is a recent introduction. Hopefully it was going to feed on the kudzu down south, which it does seem to be doing, but also like soybeans. Yeah, so soybean farmers are ecstatic to see that.
Have they started using that in New Jersey or no?
The kudzu bug? No. No, I don't think they're in any, Department of Ag is not in any rush to bring them in. I think the farthest north they come is maybe central Maryland. Okay, now the hemimetabolous insects, as I said, this could develop flies for aquatic groups. Dragonflies and mayflies, or I'm sorry, dragonflies and damselflies, mayflies and stoneflies. So this is limited, very limited. If you get an aquatic insect that has a wing, there's a good chance that's one of these groups. The fly larvae, particularly, may live in a stream or in a water situation as a larva, or I'm sorry, as a naiad, for about 3 years. And they may have as many as molts in the course of their growing up. But like I said, the adults last for 2 or 3 days at most. All right. And the dragonflies are probably the most notorious of this group. The naiads are predators feeding on just about everything they can catch in the water. And then the adults come out, and these are predators that catch their prey on the wing and eat them while they're flying. All right, and then homometabolous insects. This is everybody else. We have beetles, moths and butterflies, all the different kinds of flies, including mosquitoes and greenheads and so on. The ants, bees, and wasps, ant lions, lacewings, olive flies, fleas, and thrips. These are all holometabolous insects. So again, this comprises the majority of insect species that we have. They have the most complicated life cycle, but it seems to work best for them. And examples across the bottom. Here we have a flower fly, one of many species of them. This is a robber fly. It's a mimic. It looks like it's a bumblebee, but it actually is a predatory fly. Over here we have a moth, and then these are adult potato beetles. This is the range of insects that have this kind of development, holometabolous. Here's an example of a more detailed idea of the life cycle. Over here, we have a housefly. Housefly lays eggs, which is kind of hidden up here, but they lay a clutch of eggs. The eggs hatch into the larva, or what we call a maggot. This is a vermiform maggot-like. This is the head down here. These will feed in damp organic matter. And then when they've shed their exoskeleton about 3 times, they will go into the pupal stage, which this last larval exoskeleton will shrink up and form like a capsule. And the fly is inside that capsule. And once it's completed its development there, it has a structure called a telinum. in the head of the fly, and this solinum is like an airbag. It'll pop out and blow off the end of the capsule, and the fly is able to come out, and then that solinum shrinks and the head folds back together. It's really kind of cool. And then after minutes, the exoskeleton hardens up, and off the housefly goes to drive us nuts. Over here, same thing occurs with the mosquitoes. We have a mosquito female that lays eggs. There's some 60-odd species of mosquitoes here in New Jersey, and the majority of them lay their eggs on water, but some lay them at locations. But in this particular case, the female lays a raft of eggs on the surface of the water. These eggs will hatch, and the larvae come down into the water, swim around. They have a siphon. They have to come up to the surface to draw in air. They don't have gills to extract the oxygen out of the water. After they've spent a couple of days in this stage, they will shed their exoskeleton, become a pupa. Unlike the pupae of many other insects, these are mobile. They will swim. And they have two siphons to get oxygen. So this will, the pupa will float up to the surface and stick these up out of the water so they can draw in oxygen. And then after a couple of days in this stage, the exoskeleton splits down the back, and the adult wiggles out of this pupal stage right at the surface of the water. And after a few minutes, again, exoskeleton hardens up and off it goes. Yeah, I'm not, that's a good question. I'm not sure if birds would eat like the wigglers, the larvae. I'm not sure. It's a good question. Probably if they recognized an egg mass would be an easy target, and that might happen. Good question. Never thought about that. Give me something to look up. Okay. And then many insects have this pupal stage where they have a case over them, like the housefly. And that's the case for all the moths and butterflies. This is a moth. This is, like it says, typical moth pupa. The butterflies have different appearing pupal cases. Some of them are downright gaudy. And I don't know how they escape being eaten, because it's like advertising. Here I am, a defenseless insect. I'm just hanging here. I don't know. Right offhand, I don't remember the species here, but it's one of what they call the nymphalid butterflies. Then we have the pupal skin from a robber fly. This particular fly lives in the soil, the larva. It's a predator feeding on whatever it can catch in the soil. And then when it's ready to go into the pupal stage, it works its way up to the soil surface with the top of its head right at the surface of the soil. And when it's ready to emerge as the adult, the head splits in the back down here, so the fly is able to wiggle its way up out of the soil. And then there's a lot of beetles that don't bother with this external exoskeleton for covering. They mold into the pupal stage, sort of naked, so to speak, in a cell in the soil or in wood, and that's where they finish their development. And they're not drama queens like the moths and butterflies. When they're ready to get up and pursue life as an adult, they just simply stretch their legs, get up, and walk out. Pretty simple. Okay, external structures to aid in identification. We have antennae, eyes, wings, legs, the mouth parts. All these we can use to insects. And who did that? I have an 8-year-old. Okay. We're going to start with falling down. We're going to start with the antennae.
First of all,
It's important to understand the need to identify your problem, your pest. Like if you have a flower bed around your home and it's being infested by something that's leaves eating the flowers, before you can really manage that insect, you got to know what it is. It applies to farming. Shoot, it's the same idea in medicine. You have to accurately identify what it is that's bothering you before you can get the proper treatment. And the same thing goes with managing insects. So first of all, you have to try to figure out what it is, and then hopefully there's ways to manage it. In this particular case, this is a pepper weevil. And looking at the antennae, it has elbowed antennae along the segment here, like an elbow joint, and then a little club out here. If you have any insect that has this combination of characters of the antennae, you're 99% sure that you're looking at a weevil. And there's all kinds of weevils. There are no predatory weevils that we know of. And so every weevil you see feeds on plants of some sort. Weevil is a good image of this for evergreens around homes and such. In identifying this particular weevil, we eventually had to look for the spurs on the underside of the legs, because there were many other weevils that looked the same, about the same size, same coloration, over. But the other species lack these spurs. So anymore now, whenever we have suspicious weevil, and I want to make sure that it's not a pepper weevil, I have to look for those spurs. If it has spurs, pepper weevil. Okay, here's all kinds of different antennae. What's this insect right here? Moth? Any other opinion? No? No, I'm sorry. I saw on the moth. Moth, no. Butterfly, yes. Okay. You can tell the difference in the antennae. Butterflies have long antennae with a club out here at the tip. When you see that, and it's got the large wings of varying colors and so on, you know you have fly. And they generally fly during the day. If you have the long antennae, but you don't see a club, and the antennae may be kind of thick or even feathery, then you're dealing with a moth. And that holds across the board. Okay. What's this over here? Yep. Right. The antennae are right here. There's something distinctive about all the hairs and the eyes and the antennae on the head of a fly. Makes it relatively easy to identify. But the antennae are 3 segments, with the last one large and paddle-like. And there's this heavy-duty bristle that comes off of it. So that's fairly distinctive. What's this? Yep, very good. Ant. Again, distinctive head. It sort of has that ant-like look to it. Long antennal segment, followed at the elbow by a series of small segments here. And then the mandibles down here, of course. All right. Any idea on this one? No. Oh, I'm sorry. You said ambush? Yes. Ambush bug. The antennae themselves are not very distinctive. But when you take into account the other characters of the head and so on, it makes it easier. But, pardon? Oh, okay. The antennae themselves don't do much for you. It's hard, it would be hard to recognize them if all we had was the antennae. But now this guy is really interesting. There can be a lot said about this. This is a milkweed beetle. It's red and black. Don't try to eat it. Family of Cerambycidae, the wood-boring beetles, round-head wood-boring beetles. A few years ago, well, actually quite a number of years ago, I got a call from somebody in North Jersey. They were having a problem with these large beetles flying around in their house in January, which seemed kind of odd. And so I asked them a couple of questions. First, how big are the beetles? And they said, oh, geez, they're pretty big. They're, you know, 1.5 inches long. Really, that's good size. What can you tell me about the antennae? And she said, feelers? Yeah. The feelers are really long. I said, are they longer than half the length of the body? And she said, oh, yeah, they're really long. I knew exactly what she had. She has a fireplace or a wood burning stove. She brought wood to use in either one of those during the winter. With the wood being in a warm area of the house. The beetles, which live in the wood in the larval stage, round-headed wood-boring beetles, they continued their development and went into the pupal stage, and then from the pupal stage to the adult stage. Unfortunately for the beetles, they wound up coming out in January. And so I told her, they're confused. They're flying around trying to figure out where the heck are we? Why aren't we outside? Why is there snow around? They're confused. And she had a cathedral ceiling arrangement in her house. And so these were flying around in the upper windows and so on, and giving her a lot of grief. But that's exactly what happened. And I know that because this family of beetles, the antennae are longer than half the length of their body. And that's a dead giveaway right there. Okay, this is a simple kind of antenna. It's called maniliform or bead-like. The antenna segments look like beads on a string. And the same over here with the bean beetle. Same sort of deal. The beads are very small, like string, beads on a string with the segments. And that's the most simple type of antenna. Then we have filiform or filament-like. This is where you have long, slender antennae. Cockroaches have filiform antennae. The wood-boring beetles have filiform antennae. The antenna segments in this case are longer than they are wide. So it extends the length of the antennae. And you can see in this photo that the antennae extend well beyond half the length of the body. So this is a round-headed wood-boring beetle. Over here we have a carabid beetle. It also has filiform antennae, but these are shorter than half the length of the body. Okay, again, the shape, relative size of the antennae are good ways to help you identify insects. Here we have a beetle that has antennae that look like a serrated edged knife. And that's what they're called. They're called serrate or saw-like. And then many of the moths have these plumose or feathery kind of antennae. So you can go a long way by looking at the antennae of the insect, figure out what do you have. And then we get down to the beetles. The beetles are always the hardest group because they have a lot of exceptions. Here we have clavate, club, and types of antennae. And this becomes really important, knowing what you've got. We'll start up here with this fellow on the lower right. This is a bark beetle. If you look at the antennae here, they're cladded, which means the smallest antennae segments are up near the head, and they get gradually larger the further out you go. So this is the biggest segment out here, but it's a gradual increase. So they call that clavate. Those over here have a club where they the last 3 or 4 segments. So those are clubs. Taking another step, let's say that this antenna over here is symmetrical. If you draw a line down through the center of these segments, the one side is going to look like the other side. So it's symmetrical. If you look at these over here, draw a line down through the center, the one side is not going to look the same as the other side because you've got these protruding portions of the segment. So that's asymmetrical. We can use these adjectives to help identify the insect. All right, go back to the pepper weevil here then. We would describe this guy as having an elbowed antenna right here and a club, because we have the last 4 segments or so are suddenly enlarged. All right, you may wonder, why does this make a difference? Well, again, some years ago, there was a woman that was having a problem with beetles emerging out of the walls of her condominium. And he called in an exterminating company, and they said, well, you've got confused flower beetles. And they went ahead and gave her a recommendation for managing the beetles that did not work. She ended up spending, I don't know, $1,000, $1,500 to get rid of the beetles, and it didn't take care of them. And so they got into a verbal war, and some of the specimens wound up at the extension office in Cumberland County. And as I got to looking them over, I looked at the antennae. The antennae did not fit the description for confused flower beetle. Again, I had to rummage a little bit, but it turned out that they were powder post beetles. They were already in the wood when this condominium was built, and they were chewing their way out. Yeah. So that difference in the antennae, I mean, otherwise, you know, they weren't that far off the mark in terms of just the general overall look of the beetle. But the antennae made all the difference in the world in the biology. So went back and forth with the company a couple of times about what they had found or not found. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Probably primarily smell. Insects, you know, they talk about how great a nose bloodhounds have, or bears for that matter, really good smelling apparatus. But insects are phenomenal because they can detect very minute amounts of pheromones in the air. And so they're really, pardon? Sometimes, because there's some of the deodorants and makeup that have some of these aerosols mixed in there, and some of them are tip off to yellow jackets, honeybees, and so on. Yes, yep, unfortunately. But yes, the antennae are sensory. Okay, so back to the head of the butterfly, and onto this beetle. All right, how would you describe the antennae of this beetle? Yeah. Oh, well, that's what they would call laminate. when that last segment are like that, are plate-like. All right, how else would you describe the antennae?
Elbow,
Elbowed, yep. I'm sorry? Okay, yes, that's like the laminate. Fork? Forked. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, same thing as she's saying, lamellate, yes. Okay, anything else? Okay, if those segments that are lamellate, if they're closed, you can see that it's clubbed. Okay, so the best way to describe it is elbowed, clubbed with lamellate segments. Okay. Now with these beetles, this is a scarab. They're able to move those segments so they can expand them like this and get great exposure to the air, or when they're disturbed, they can bring them together. Okay. Now, in a case of a beetle that's just resting, this one seems to be just resting on a leaf like that. It may have those antennal segments closed together, but as soon as it's disturbed, boom, they open up. What's going on out here? Do I detect anything that I need to know about? You know, so that's how these antennae work. They are sensory, definitely. Okay, and then we go to the eyes. And this is always a tricky bunch. Most insects have two compound eyes, as in this case here with this fruit fly. But the compound eyes are made up of a lot of individual eyes called ommatidia. So in other words, you see the lines crisscrossing here on the eye? Each one of those light areas is an individual facet, has its own cornea and nerve ending into the brain. So what this particular fly is doing is when it looks at something, it's like a mosaic. How many eyes or how many facets are in that compound eye? I have no idea, but it's a fair number. Okay. If we go to the dragonfly here, there's actually two different kinds of eyes. There's compound eyes and simple eyes. How many facets do you think are in these compound eyes on the dragonfly? Looks like it. Yeah, many. If you had a couple of weeks where you had nothing else to do, you could sit down and count the number of facets of the compound eyes of the dragonfly. It does have three simple eyes, and those simple eyes are here. One there, and one there. Not really certain what those simple eyes for the insect. Obviously, they're sensory. They fill in the gap that the compound eyes would miss. What's really neat about the compound eyes of the dragonflies, it's one of the few animals on the planet that can sit up, down, sideways, straight ahead, and back all at the same time. It's sort of like surround sound vision. You know, try sneaking up on one, it's tough. They and mantis shrimps have that ability. Okay. The simple eyes, the most you'll ever see are three, and often there won't be any. There may be none, one, two, or three. And sometimes the references you use it say, look for the simple eyes. How many are there? I don't know. They kind of blend into the insect cuticle. It's kind of tough. All right. Compound eye there, the simple eyes there. This is a male striped horsefly. The males zoom in on the females largely by sight. And so they have these two massive compound eyes to help them figure out where the females are. also applies to carpenter bees. The carpenter bees that hover around spring around your buildings and so on, the ones that hover, male. They and you can confirm that if you get close enough to one that hovers right in front of you, you can see that it's very large compound eyes. And you know that's a male. The females have smaller compound eyes. They do sting. So, yes. Yeah. Males make short tunnels into the wood and lay eggs in there. And they really like cedar. If you have cedar shingles or siding, they really go for it. But that's what they're doing. They look for protected areas under the eaves and so on. They will go in, they'll bore these short tunnels. Usually there's a bend in the tunnel. So one of the recommendations is to control them is to take a wire and spin the hole and wiggle it around and break up the eggs or whatever in there. Yeah, they're not hornets. I mean, they don't chase you. If one lands on you, yeah, I'll probably sting you, the female, but otherwise they.
Yeah, that's what Danny does. And does it?
No, actually, they found the carpenter beetles, or carpenter bees rather, do pollinate certain plants. As I recall, they zero in on those kind of plants. So they are pollinating to an extent. All right, here we have a group of bees that are going to spend the night together on this head of grass. And if you look close, you can see simple eyes up here on the top of the head, 3 in all these. Here's the head of a hornet. And again, you can see the 3 simple eyes up here, the compound eyes on the side of the head. Now, our milkweed beetle friend has what they call emarginate eyes. And that's where the antenna looks like it's been stuck into the middle of the compound eye. There's this area of the compound eye you can see quite well, but then there's a very narrow strip of it going up this way. And there's another bunch of compound eye on the upper side of the antenna. And all the cerambycids have these emarginate eyes, which is another way to tell what you've got in terms of the round-headed wood-boring beetles. Okay, mouthpart types. There's 3 basic types: chewing, sucking, and lapping. Insects that have chewing mouthparts have mandibles, jaws that move sideways. And they're able to chew up things, everything from other insects to seeds or what have you. Those all have usually very strong mandibles. Sucking insects have mouthparts where the mouthparts have been modified so that it's more like a straw. And like in butterflies and moths, they have that proboscis, we call it, rolled up under their head. And then when they want to suck up liquids, they're able to roll it, unroll it, and go for the nectar and flower or water, and, like in mud puddles and so on. The lapping mouthparts are really sort of like part of the mouthparts have been formed into like a tongue. So they're actually able to draw up liquids with their tongue. These insects often have mandibles as well. Honeybees. Honeybees have jaws, strong jaws, and then they also have this tongue with which they can lap up nectar and other fluids. All right, these are the 3 principal types. Isn't this great? So much about bugs that next time you have a party, you'll be able to wow everybody around you. Okay, head of a dragonfly. This is an example of the mouth parts of a chewing insect. You have 4 parts: an upper lip, the mandibles or jaws under that, and then there's a secondary pair of jaws called maxillae that are further back in and smaller. And then finally the lower lip, labium. And this is the labium is very large in dragonflies because they catch their prey while they're flying and then eat them while they're flying. So you need a large lower lip to keep everything up in the mouth. But all chewing insects have this pattern of mouth parts. This is a head of a caravid beetle. And this is one that burrows around in the surface of the soil. And it has those 4 parts, just like the dragonfly. We have a labrum that's relatively small, but enormous mandibles, really huge. They tackle very large prey. And then a very tiny labium back here. The maxillae you can see here, but again, they're smaller than the mandibles and kind of pushed to the back. But all the insects that have chewing mouth parts have mouth parts like these. And sometimes when you look at the mandibles, we can get some idea of the biology of the insect. Are they predators? Are they wood borers or whatever? In this case, that flat bark beetle, its jaws look pretty stout, and they've got these really sharp teeth on them. The primary prey of these flat bark beetles are the wood-boring elm bark beetles or pine bark beetle. And those beetles are very small, very compact, very hard. And the mandible, this guy up here, looked to be well up a can of bark beetle. Down here is the head of another wood-boring cerambycid beetle. You can see the emarginate eyes, and there's the antennae going off. And you look at the mandibles. The mandibles are very heavy, strong mandibles. They have to have this because the cerambycid beetle finishes its development inside wood. When it goes into the pupal stage, it's still inside wood. In order to get out, it has to have these mandibles chew through the wood so it can escape. Lacking those, it ends up staying in the wood, which is not the best interest of the beetle. Over here, we have mandibles of another caravid beetle. And you can see we have the pointed tips here. This is definitely a predator, feeding mostly on insects. And then back here, we have, it looks like rounded teeth coming out here, but that's very flat. These operate like scissors. So the points grab hold and tear the prey. And then when they start to really go after it, dismember it, they get the prey back where these blades are, and then they act like scissors. All right, so we can tell a lot from the mandibles of what the insect does. All right, these are 4 different kinds of ants. Which one of these ants also, besides eating insects, which one of these ants also eats seeds in their diet?
One in the top right.
Top right?
Top right.
Top right? Yep, you're right, top right. This one, they do eat insects, but they're also capable of eating seeds because they have these short, stout mandibles that can apply a lot of pressure. The mandibles of these others, they're good for capturing prey, especially this one. Yeah, well, all 3 of them are really good at that, okay? So again, we can tell a lot by the mandibles. All right, sucking mouth parts, a little more simple. Again, talk about butterflies and moths. They have this proboscis. All their mouth parts have been transformed into the sucking straw. And, and they take up liquids, nectar and water and so on. Down here, we have an example of a different kind of a sucking mouth part. This is a minute pirate bug. And its sucking mouthparts are more like a beak. And it's called a piercing sucking beak. Mandibles now have been, they're not side-to-side operating jaws, but they've been modified into stylets, knife-like stylets that are inside the beak. So in the case of this pirate bug, it's a predator and it's gone after a thrip. The insect places the tip of the beak against the prey and bam, jams these stylets into it. So it basically harpoons its prey. After that, it injects digestive fluids that both immobilize, paralyze the prey, but also begin to liquefy its innards, dissolving, digesting the organs. And the pirate bug sucks it back out, injects more toxins, sucks that back out, back and forth until finally the only thing that thrip is the exoskeleton. Everything else has been eaten. Me. Just a close-up view. And then we have the lapping tongues. Like I mentioned earlier, honeybees have both mandibles and this lapping tongue. And I believe this is an extension of the labium, the lower mouth part on chewing insects. Okay, so it can do a little bit of both. But we have other lappers, such as houseflies. They don't have mandibles, and their lapping apparatus is a little different than honeybees. Their mouth parts end in sort of the sponge-like organ. And imagine this, you're on a picnic. You have your potato salad, obviously this is in the summertime. You have your potato salad and all your other goodies spread out at the picnic table. And no sooner than you've done that, in come a couple of flies. They land on the potato salad. And you look at it, you try to swoosh them away, but they keep coming back because they realize, hey, this is good stuff. You look at the fly and you notice that under its head, it's got this arm-like thing that comes down and is touching the surface of the potato salad. What is that fly doing?
You're eating bile or what you want to call your food and actually breaking it down and then stuffing it back up.
Yep.
Leave a little pepper for you. It's a little extra flavor.
Yes, yes, absolutely. The fly has no jaws. There's no way for it to eat anything beyond the liquid. You know, gloppy, can't deal with it. So what they do is, you know, like you said, put the lapping mouth part down, spit on your food, liquefy it, then lap it back up. Doesn't that sound good? It's very efficient. The greatest hope that you have is that there isn't a dead animal somewhere nearby where they've been doing the same thing. Okay, studying insects is so much fun. All right, presenting the thorax. The legs and the wings belong in the thorax, the middle part of the
Unicorn.
And
Don't really like when they put all of these porcelain creatures together.
we
And in fact, we tend to end up with some chipped teeth.
concentrating on this part of the body
I'm
here.
pass on those. I don't steal a lot of unicorns,
This
believe
is
it or not.
probably one of the best insect photos I've ever seen. This is really cool. These are ambush bugs. This is the male.
It's not heavy enough to be chalkware, but yet, oh, it's hollow.
What's really neat is, especially with the female, we can see the different parts of the thorax.
It's kind of big, and I don't think it's
So from here forward is the head.
for shipping that.
And then we can make these lines here.
Oh, it's a little
The
taco.
thorax, the front end of the thorax, and there's the front pair of legs.
Would have had a lid. You
There's the
can tell that.
metathorax, I'm sorry, mesothorax, and the middle pair of legs.
$9.99 is not
That
bad.
is the metathorax and the back pair of legs.
It's cracked all the way through.
3 regions to the thorax.
no-go.
Each region has a pair of legs.
We
Associated
don't have
with it.
without the lid either, when it clearly
That's
meets
one of the- that's why
to
this
be
is such a
complete,
cool
I
photograph.
will leave those behind. Versus if it looks like it can go,
Now, what's the big deal about that? Sometimes you're going to be looking at an insect, and if you're trying to identify it, somewhere in the reference they'll say, well, look for a spine on the mesothoracic legs. Which ones are the mesothoracic legs? The ones in the middle. Okay. Prothorax, mesothorax, metathorax. Okay. This is one way to help with an identification, understand what's happening with the bug in front of you. All right. And then we get into the legs. Insects have 5 parts to their legs. They have a coxa, which holds the leg to the body, a trochanter, which is very often small and acts sort of like a swivel joint. And then the biggest portion of the leg is the femur, followed by the tibia, and then the foot or tarsus down here. And the tarsus may be divided into 5 segments as well, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so all insects have this combination: coxa, trochanter, femur, tibia, and tarsus, standard across all the insects. The actual shape of the legs may change greatly from critter to critter, but that's the basic organization. All right, then we get into this thing called a tarsal formula. And this sounds kind of nitpicky in a way, but it's going back like the business about the antennae. You have to be aware of how many segments are in the feet of the insect, because that's key in identifying certain beetles especially. This is called a tarsal formula. If we're looking just at the feet of the insects now, we want to count out the number of segments that are there: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, and 5. So we have a tarsal formula of 5 for the prothoracic legs, 5 for mesothoracic, and 5 for the metathoracic legs. 5, 5, 5. Okay. Now, going back to our old friend, the milkweed beetle, we look over here, and tarsal formula is 4, 4, 4. And we look at the feet here, and yep, there's 1, 2, one that's shaped like a horseshoe, and then the 4th one here. Same here, and same here. Okay, well, what's the deal here then? Why is there a question mark after the 4, 4, 4? That's because it's saying it appears they have a 4, 4, 4 tarsal formula. Actually, it's a 5, 5, 5 formula, because there's a little inky-dinky segment right in there on each of these feet. You probably can't see it without a microscope. And again, why is this important? Well, again, if you're trying to identify an insect, and you make sure you've got the right critter you're trying to manage, you have to look for these sort of things. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you are going to go on and open up a bit for identifying insects, but nevertheless, when you get a recommendation from an outfit to manage an indoor pest, or crop pest or whatever, you got to know what it is you're trying to control. All right, beetles are especially difficult, both for the tarsal formulas and for the antennae. In general, you can say that any insect that has swollen forelegs, predators. Now, front legs, and they're not predators, but that's about the only one I can think of that isn't. So not all predators have swollen front legs, but the ones that do are predators. And you have like 99% certainty on that. So if someone is asking you, well, what do you think? Is this a beneficial insect? It's got these, front legs that makes it look mean, serious. If you see the swollen front legs, more than likely you say, yes, this is a predator. And yeah, you could call it a beneficial insect if you want. All right. I'm not sure. I think I'm going to be finishing close to noon, maybe going over a few minutes. If you need to get leave, go and do so. Hopefully not everybody gets up and leaves. Okay, then wings. We look at the number of wings, helpful. Wings can tell us immediately about whether we're looking at flies or other critters. There's 0, 1, or 2 pairs of wings. Fleas and lice, fortunately, have no wings. Flies and some mayflies have 1 pair, and then everybody else has 2 pairs of wings, assuming that they have wings. Some wing insect groups have wingless forms. And that's what this is. This is a red velvet ant. It's a wasp, but the females do not have wings. You see one of these walking around on the ground, don't try to pick it up, you'll get stung. Another name for these are cow killers. Not that they kill cows, but gives you some idea, you get a pretty nasty sting out of it. But these are wasps, but they don't have wings in the females. We have egg masses that we can look at to help determine what the insects are. Here's an egg mass of stink bugs. The stink bug egg mass has a group of eggs stacked together. They're sort of like barrels. And the hatching stink bugs come up out of the barrels. Of course, that helps to see the insect right there with the eggs and help identify it, but that's characteristic of stink bugs. Excuse me. These are the eggs of the harlequin stink bug. It looks like somebody entered a clown contest or something with these. But these are very distinctive eggs. You'll see them on any cruciferous garden plants. Harlequin bugs feed almost exclusively on cabbages and related plants. And when you see an egg mac like this, you know you've got these harlequin stink bugs nearby. These eggs of the European cabbage worm are also very distinctive. They lay their eggs on broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and related plants. And the eggs are very distinctive. They lay them as 1 egg, and it sticks up from the surface like that. If you look close enough, you have a hand lens, you'll see that there's a bit of a sculpture to the egg out on the external side. But you know that when you start seeing these single eggs like that, in a couple of days, you're going to have small green caterpillars to eat the leafy parts of the plants. This is a carrot weevil. This is the root of a carrot. And sometimes, well, if you look in the literature, they say the carrot weevil lays its eggs in the petioles of the leaves, but not always. Sometimes carrot weevil will lay the eggs on the part of the carrot that's down on the ground, the root. So you look for small holes like this that are filled with these dark oval eggs. And here's a carrot weevil grub that is just hatched. It's mere seconds old. I was really fortunate to get the photograph. All right, again, you shouldn't be encountering anything else on the carrot root that would be like this. And then we have other kinds of egg masses. This is the egg mass of fall armyworm. There's 200-300 eggs here, and they're covered in fuzz. The hairs off of the underside of the female abdomen breaks off and covers over the egg mass. Fall armyworm is a pest on sweet corn and many other crops. They're kind of broad spectrum, you might say, in their feeding habits, but they like corn, small grains, like that. But their egg masses are fairly distinctive. After looking at a lot of corn and sweet corn, or yeah, field corn and sweet corn, there's no other egg mass that you're going to see in those plants that resemble this. So if you see this, it's probably fall armyworm. These are very distinctive. These are the eggs of green lacewing. Green lacewing is a predator. This is one of the best biocontrol agents that we've got. And they're very common. You can find them pretty much everywhere. The female comes along and taps the tip of the abdomen on the leaf and then extrudes a silk strand with the egg attached at the end of it. And you can see there's a fair number of eggs there like that. They're separated in time and space because the larvae are cannibalistic. First, now probably ends up eating a bunch of his siblings. Okay, so they try to separate them, give everybody a fair chance. The immature, the larva, kind of reminds me of an alligator. It's got the 6 legs, has very long sickle-shaped jaws. Those jaws are hollow, so that when it comes up to prey, it'll grab hold of the prey and basically siphon their body fluids up through its mandibles. They are voracious. They will eat anything that's small enough to grab hold of. I've even seen them where they attack leaf miners. You know, the leaf miner boring in between the cuticles of leaves, covering over it, and is able to figure out where the insect is inside the leaf mine, and will pierce the mine to get at the insect. These are excellent. If these in your garden, your flower bed, or your adequate. Okay, this is our last slide, and holy crap, I'm done faster than I thought. Okay, there's a story behind this one. You see 3 insects, and the big black guy in the center is damsel bug. It's got swollen forelegs, so it's a predator. And it has just captured the green guy, a tarnished plant bug. Tarnished plant bug is a plant feeder primarily. It may pick off a few small caterpillars maybe, but in general, it's a plant pest. Pretty significant pest at times. All right, so the damsel bug is about to make lunch out of the tarnished plant bug. Both have piercing, sucking mouth parts, and the damsel bug doesn't look like it's put his beak into the tarnished plant bug yet. So, okay, well and fine, a predator catching its prey. So what the heck is going on with the little fly on the back of the damsel bug?
He's depositing an egg.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing. In the insect world, you don't have somebody come and land on your back, you know, hey, how's it going? You know, or, geez, I'm really tired. Do you mind if I rest on your back for a while? Doesn't happen. Doesn't work that way. I am guessing that this is a fly that brought the family Phoridae. Half of the phorids parasitic. The other half lay their eggs and their larvae develop in the stagnant ponds, down in the ooze of those ponds. The parasitic ones are really good at being parasites, or I should say parasitoids. Yeah, what may happen next, I'm suggesting, is that the fly is going to lay an egg on the back of the damsel bug. And when that egg hatches, the larva is not going to come up out of the egg. Instead, it's going to bore a hole through the cuticle of the damsel bug and then wander around inside the damsel bug for some period of time. As it grows, it gets bigger, it'll consume more. And when it goes to, it's ready to go to the pupal stage, if it hasn't killed the damsel bug yet, it will. It'll eat something critical to the damsel bug. And so the damsel bug dies. The pupa may stay either inside the damsel bug or it may come out through a hole in the side of the damsel bug, fall to the ground and go to a pupa stage. I'm not sure which way it would go here. So in the end, the damsel bug, even though it's very active predator, it may die from the fly on its back. Now, there's a couple of different things here. One, I'm not sure if that's an adult damsel bug or not. It may be an immature because I cannot see wings on its back, but I do see what appear to be wing pads. So I'm not sure if this is juvenile or an adult. If it's a juvenile, there's a chance that it'll shed its exoskeleton possibly before the fly's egg would hatch. In which case, the damsel bug is safe and the fly larva is going to be having a problem. That's a possibility. But if this is a wingless, one of the wingless species of damsel bugs, then this could well be an adult. And if that's the case, then maybe toast here in not too distant future. Now, these phorids are encouraged to control fire ants. I've seen the short videos of how they use them in areas where fire ants occur. The flies will hover over the ants. The ants know that the flies are there, and they will rear their heads back, snapping at the flies. Flies are pretty agile to get out of the way. But whenever one of the ants is exposed long enough, the fly comes down and slaps an egg on the back side of the head of the ant. When that egg hatches, it then bores into the membranes holding the head to the thorax, essentially decapitates the ant. And then the grub bores into the head, feeding on the muscles in the head and the brain and so on of the ant. And it'll pupate in there. And when it's ready to come out as an adult, it wiggles out through that neck hole, and there you have a fly. And on it goes. So they found that these phorid flies are among the best tools they have against fire ants. So you might see this on National Geographic, I don't know. All right, I have come to the end. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you later.